Okay, I think we can go ahead and start. Are we live on YouTube?
Yes, sure, Case, we are now live.
Super. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. This is the November. Wait, I guess we should get our view up, participant view up.
What are you waiting for?
Well, maybe it's just my view. I don't have.
You don't have a gallery view?
Sorry. Yeah, I've got meeting of the Hawaii Climate Commission.
If you look at your view up on a.
There we go. Standard. Yeah. Nope.
Did you gallery?
I think I'm okay. Okay, let's go ahead. And this is the November 1, 2021 meeting of the Hawaii Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're holding the meeting on via Zoom due to the ongoing pandemic, and because it's actually very easy for people to access. We also are showing it live on YouTube for the general public who want to watch. Let me just do a quick roll call. And if you could just unmute yourself and say here when I call your affiliation, we'll just get a record of everyone who's here. So DLNR, that's me. Office of Planning.
Here, present.
Thank you. Senate Agriculture and Environment.
Aloha.
Aloha. Senate Water and Land. Okay, House EEP.
Aloha, I'm present.
Thank you. House Water and Land.
Aloha, David Tarnas here.
Thank you. Office of Hawaiian Affairs.
Aloha, Sylvia Hussey here.
Great. Department of Hawaiian Homelands.
Aloha.
Thank you. Department of Health.
Good afternoon, here.
Board of Education.
Aloha, Randy Tanaka here.
Aloha.
Aloha, everyone.
Department of Transportation.
Good afternoon, Chair. Present.
Thank you. Hawaii Tourism Authority.
Hello, Suzanne. George Camp here.
Aloha. DBED.
Aloha, Suzanne. This is Mike McCartney.
Excellent. And Department of Agriculture.
I present.
Thank you. Hi, Ima.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon. CZM Office of Planning.
Present, Justine Ihipeli here. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. All right, Kauai County.
Sorry, present, Chair.
Thank you. City and County of Honolulu.
I'm here.
Hawaii County.
Present.
And Maui County.
Present.
Thank you all for joining, and thank you all additional interested parties who are great participants in this meeting. Just a couple of announcements. I first of all, I wanted to acknowledge Diana Lupera from the DLNR Vista program and Revere Wood from the Hawaii State Energy Office Vista program. They've had just tremendous meeting support for this, and we really are very fortunate to have their highly skilled assistance with the meeting. If you have any questions, issues with the Zoom, direct them to Diana in the chat. And let me just call on Diana to give some brief Zoom logistics.
Well, hi, everybody. So my name is Diana. I will be helping with any technical issues you may have with the Zoom meeting. Just a couple reminders to make sure to rename your Zoom name to include your name and affiliation so that we can help with attendance, keeping track of who's here. If you need help with that, just let us know as well. We'd be more than happy to help you. Next rule is to please keep your mics muted unless prompted to speak. And commission members, if you could please keep your videos on for the entirety of the meeting. And then for everyone else, just leave it off unless you are presenting or you're giving testimony. But yeah, just let me know if you have anything that you need. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, first up, we're gonna hear the minutes of the July 19, 2021 meeting. Are there any additions or changes to the minutes? Mary Alice Evans.
Chair, I just have two very small typos to correct. On page 5, items 4C and D, Justine's name has an E on the end, and mine has Alice as part of my first name.
Thank you very much. Duly noted. Anyone else have any corrections to the minutes? Okay. Hearing none, is there any public testimony on the minutes? If not, is there a motion to approve those minutes as amended?
Second.
And Mary Alice, you were on mute, but we'll take your move, and Zendo Kern is second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any oppose? Any
Yeah,
abstain?
Chair, I abstain. I didn't attend the meeting, so
Thank you. That's a good point. Thank you very much. Okay, those pass. All right. Well, we have a very special guest today. We are, as you know, about to actually COP26. The earlier part of it is starting in Scotland, and there's a number of us going to the delegation. And I want to just say we are very pleased to have Governor Ige here in our meeting, who is going to be joining the discussion today and leading our delegation. Let me just recognize there's a number of people, including people in this call, who are going to COP26. And I am sure you guys are all seeing now already the tremendous amount of world attention on COP26, how it's so important for us to take action at this time. And so it's really terrific that we have good, solid support from Hawaii and a number of people going who are voicing Hawaii's commitment to our climate solutions worldwide and locally. So I just want to acknowledge from the governor's team here, we have the governor and myself and Scott Glenn and Anu Hittel, among others joining. I think that's who is in the call here. We have a great Hawaii Ohana delegation. And these are people who have official roles, Blue Zone passes, and are speaking and engaging in the COP. I know Rep. Lowen is going. Diana Lopera will be there. I'll just read the ones that I know of here. Rep. Lowen, Maui County Council Member Kelly King, Dr. Chip Fletcher, Colin Lee, Joe Udell, Diana Lopera, Justice Mike Wilson, Professor Denise Antolini, Naima Temaili, and Professor David Foreman. And then there's others that I know of that are going to COP26 who have a variety of roles: Hank Rogers, Marty Townsend, Ikaika Hussey, Jeff Michelina, Joshua Cooper, Senator Brian Schatz, Hawaii Senator Chris Lee. Anyone else who's on the call here who I didn't note who is planning to go? All right, well, as you can see, it's definitely a terrific representation of people from Hawaii. And leading the delegation will be our very own Governor, David Ige. And it's a real pleasure and honor to welcome you, Governor. And now just ask you to say a few remarks about why it's so important for Hawaii to have a strong presence in this global conference. Welcome, Governor.
Yeah. Thanks, aloha. Thank you so much, Suzanne. I appreciate. I'm really glad to be able to address the state's Climate Change Mitigation and Adaptation Commission. As many of you may know, I will be leaving this week to head off to the global climate negotiations at COP26 in Glasgow, Scotland. I know I'm preaching to the choir when I try and talk about the challenges of a dangerously warming world. All of you have led the effort here in the islands, and Hawaii continues to lead the planet in addressing climate change. But I do want to talk a little bit about why I'm going and why I believe it is so important to Hawaii and our Pacific Island neighbors. We've been talking a lot in the state team, just focused on the message that we want to deliver in Glasgow. And it is arranged around 3 teams. First and foremost, that islands mattered. COP26, the Paris Agreement was really driven by leadership from island communities around the planet and embraced by Barack Obama to get the Paris Agreement done. We do know that the climate change is a challenge for all of us on island Earth. We know that island communities see the impact of climate change more forcefully and dramatically. And that's why island communities are so important in this conversation. And that's why I'm going to represent the state of Hawaii and island communities all around the Pacific. The second real focus is that it's time for action. In Hawaii, I'm proud that Hawaii as a state has been at the forefront of this climate challenge for many, many years. And we have seen states and cities jump to the forefront because other larger organizations and governments have been timid and unable to take that step forward. So we do know that communities like ours are important, and it's important for us to be willing to step forward and lead the way. The third important message is that we need to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius. We all know, we embrace the science. We do know that the human body with elevated temperatures faces a dangerous situation for the health of the body. Well, we are seeing the same thing for our planet. Climate change is an existential threat to Hawaii and the world, and especially our Pacific Island neighbors. Like traditional navigators in a Hawaiian voyaging canoes, we can see the storm clouds ahead. We see the chloral bleaching events. We see the rain bombs and the overwhelming flooding, the drought, the wildfires that continue to ravage our community. That's just an indication of the challenges of climate change. And like the crews of the voyaging canoes, we can and we must paddle together, guided by keen navigators to achieve our goals to reverse climate change and heal our planet. Together, we will help each other arrive at a more sustainable, equitable world for all of us. And this brings me to the second point. Real and lasting change at the state and county level can be made to work, and we will all share in the benefits. We can't wait for a global solution. We must step out and lead when we can. Hawaii is playing such an important role in this effort. We led the world in being the first to commit to 100% clean renewable energy goal, and many of you on this call was part of that effort. We were the first state to show our commitment to climate action by embracing the Paris Agreement in law. And again, I know that many of you were involved in that, taking that step forward. And we were grateful that this year, the US rejoined the Paris Agreement and renewed its pledge to keep global warming under 2 degrees. And we all celebrated the election of President Biden. And this year, Hawaii declared a climate emergency, recognizing that climate change is an existential threat to our communities. I continue to work with 24 other governors in the US Climate Alliance, both Democrats and Republicans, to move the country forward in a more responsible way. The Alliance is a formidable organization representing 55% of the US population and an estimated $11 trillion economy, an economy larger than all the countries in the world except for the United States and China. Hawaii is also part of the Under 2 Coalition, a coalition of 260 local governments around the world committed to keeping global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees C, with efforts to reach 1.5 degrees. Together, subnational leaders, or as Governor Inslee would like to say, supranational leaders, are building the structures for a healthy, vibrant, and balanced world because we know it is an existential threat. The pandemic highlighted the importance of our connections with each other and the natural world. It has also highlighted how interconnected societies can work together to manage huge global threats. This lesson applies to meeting the climate crisis. You know, building back better, as President Biden likes to say, means a broad-based, inclusive approach to the pandemic recovery. It means ensuring the stimulus package boosts sustainable businesses. It means increasing investment in climate-smart practices that can create jobs to address equity, resilience, and clean energy. It means increasing investment in nature-based solutions to protect our beaches and natural lands and become more resilient than ever. At the COP, many nations are coming forward with commitments to net zero or signing on to the race to zero emissions by 2050. We know that that's not good enough because it will still lead to a world of 2 degrees or more warming. In Hawaii, nature-based solutions will help us go beyond zero emissions to a sub-zero future. We have a target to sequester more than we emit as quickly as practicable, but no later than 2045. All of you know that net zero is not good enough. It is about going beyond net zero to actually capturing more carbon than we emit. The State Climate Commission emphasizes the nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, and carbon-smart practices must be prioritized for a climate-ready Hawaii. Along with 24 other governors, I have committed to priority policy areas for collective coalition adoption to meet our near and long-term targets. These build on our commitment to the Paris Agreement to speak to more ambitious commitments pledged by President Biden, such as to reduce greenhouse gas emissions at least 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by the year 2030. These priority policies are general commitments, and we will support other jurisdictions through our national and international engagements to implement them and to pursue them in a way here at home that is culturally relevant to Hawaii. These 8 priority areas include power, buildings, industry, transportation, just transition and equity, resilience, natural and working lands, and the social cost of greenhouse gases. Later this week, I will join my fellow US Climate Alliance governors in announcing specific commitments in these areas. And I assure you, with all of your support and your advocacy, Hawaii will once again demonstrate that we want to make high impact actions as we move forward. We have embraced these big ambitions because we know that big ambition leads to big action. And that is what we're doing now, taking big action here in Hawaii. In Hawaii, reversing the climate crisis is critical to preserving our unique biodiversity, culture, and economy. We are not willing to wait for the rest of the planet. We are taking action. We can, because we know it's in our community's best interest. Over the past 5 years, we have seen how Hawaii's leadership can inspire other states and organizations to take bolder action and lead to more action and broader support all around the world. And this is why Hawaii is leading once again and showing how small islands can move the world with aloha and innovation. Hawaii is all in to address the climate crisis. And this is the message that I, and with all of your support, will be taking to COP26. You know, to underscore this, I'd like to highlight the leadership of some of Hawaii's residents, especially our youth leaders, at the World Conservation Congress this past September in Marseille, France. I was so disappointed that I was not able to attend that conference. I know that Chair Case and others on this call was a vital part of the activities and discussions at the World Conservation Congress this past September. Those of you have played such an important part in establishing the Climate Change Commission within the IUCN. In honor of their leadership, I am presenting to the IUCN Hawaii delegation a recognition of this effort with this proclamation. And I'm just going to read it briefly. Whereas Hawaii hosted the International Union for the Conservation of Nature World Conservation Congress in 2016, where Hawaii was recognized around the world for its leadership in conservation. And whereas since the 2016 World Conservation Congress, the global climate crisis has worsened, with the United Nations issuing a code red for humanity if stronger action is not taken. And whereas as the World Conservation Congress in September 2021 in Marseille, France, the Hawaii Conservation Alliance Foundation and the Kua'aina Ulu Au'amo, among others, submitted Motion 003, calling for the creation of a new IUCN Climate Crisis Commission to mobilize and coordinate the IUCN and broader civil society to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change. And whereas Hawaii residents formed the group, Our Drowning Voices, to serve as the vanguard to give voice for climate justice in the name of younger and future generations, indigenous people, island nations, and willing nations and partners. And whereas Our Drowning Voices, through their passionate and persistent advocacy, enlisted hundreds of IUCN voting members around the world in support of Motion 003, and whereas the IUCN voted to create the Climate Change Commission with 76% of the vote from governments and 68% of the vote from non-governmental organizations supporting the creation. Now, therefore, I, David Ige, as governor of the state of Hawaii, do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2021 as Our Drowning Voices Day, and ask all the people in the Aloha State to join me in recognizing the leadership of our residents especially our youth, in translating commitment into action and changing the trajectory of Hawaii and island Earth so that our children and future generations can continue to call it home. And this was done today at the state capitol. I did want to thank the many IUCN delegates that are joining us on the call today. On their behalf, May Nachum is here to virtually accept this recognition and this proclamation on behalf of all of those in our drowning voices. Thank you so much, May, for your leadership in Marseille, and thank you for your commitment to saving our planet. May.
Aloha, thank you so much. I'm Mai Nahum, one of the founders of the Our Drowning Voices Vanguard, and it is my honor to accept this recognition alongside the team from KUA and Hawaii Conservation Alliance Foundation, who without them, none of this would be possible. I'm proud to say that amongst all odds, and the odds were all stacked against us, we were able to bring the Aloha warrior spirit to the Congress and establish the 7th IUCN Commission, the Climate Change Commission. Our goal was to put the sinking island states at the forefront of the global climate action conversation and to ensure that our voices never drown. This is only the beginning for what the youth of Hawaii and the Pacific is ready to initiate globally. So mahalo to you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you to Governor. Thank you to Mai. And I noticed a number of people who are in that delegation are on the screen here, and many of you have shared your video screen. I just ask you to all do that and raise your hands so we can properly acknowledge your terrific role here. There you go. A lot of people here. Check on page 2 also of your screen. And thank you so much, Governor. It's really, I'm so proud to work with you on climate issues and to have you leading our delegation to Glasgow. And you know, just to have someone of your technical and financial capability and passion and knowledge and awareness of what a critical issue climate is for as an existential issue for our planet. So I really want to mahalo you for that leadership, and I'm very proud to be able to go with you. And I also wanted to say I got a text information that some of our Hawaii Ohana delegation are actually joining us live here and watching from Glasgow, where you are already there. So again, really proud to have everyone participating in such a committed way. Thank you all so much.
Thank you. Aloha to all. Thank you for
Aloha.
giving me this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Governor. And with that, I want to take a moment to highlight within each of the priority areas that the governor mentioned. Individual member states of the U.S. Climate Alliance have committed to specific and new high impact actions that will accelerate greenhouse gas emissions reductions and drive the sort of real impactful implementation and results needed to make the US climate targets a reality. And the new high impact actions build and expand on years of increasingly bold and ambitious commitments and actions from all of the Alliance states. And you'll hear this theme, I think, throughout this group and throughout Glasgow is we need two things. We need powerful goals and we need powerful implementation. And so I'm very pleased to say that Hawaii has committed to several of these, and I'll read you some examples. 100% net zero operating emissions government buildings by 2030. 100% zero emission vehicles, new light duty sales by 2035. 100% zero emission light duty public fleets by 2035. 100% zero emission public and government owned transit bus fleets by 2030. 100% zero emission medium, and heavy-duty public fleets by 2040, where technically feasible. Promote sustainable communities that provide a range of affordable housing and transportation options that increase access to opportunity and reduce vehicle miles traveled. Empower disadvantaged communities and foster leadership to develop climate and clean energy solutions and policies through training, facilitation, and funding. Commit to a just transition that provides for sustainable livelihoods for those reliant on the fossil fuel economy and the shift to more sustainable systems and practices. Integrate racial and gender diversity in developing environmental solutions to the climate crisis. Conserve at least 30% of land and coastal waters by 2030. Commit to large-scale restoration of forests and other locally indigenous ecosystems. Increase tree canopy in disadvantaged and/or heat vulnerable communities by at least 40% by 2030 to mitigate urban heat island effects. And increase consumption of food produced within the jurisdiction to at least 20 to 30% of food consumed by 2030. I think you'll hear in these goals, number one, an echo of the work you are all doing, because this is really a roll up and a roll down of that work. And to be able to make these commitments, we have to have people and institutions in place who are committed to this action, and we know that you are. And this is the important message that we have for other jurisdictions. Raising that ambition, we can do more on the ground. And to illustrate this, we've developed a list housed on our web portal, and I'm going to turn it over to Anu to walk you through this.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you for being here, Governor. And good afternoon, Kako. You all know me already, but for the record, let me introduce myself again. I'm Anu Hittel, coordinator of this august statewide commission. And it's a pleasure to support Governor in the state of Hawaii at the COP26. So our work here in Hawaii shows a strong link with the international stage. You've already heard about the priority policy areas from Governor. And these are the policies of collective action with the US Climate Alliance states. And then those high impact actions that we're committing to, you heard Chair talking about some of those examples. And then what we'll do now is just walk you really briefly through the high impact actions on the ground. And we're calling these high as an HI, like Hawaii, impact actions that we're already doing as a body and as individual departments. So, I've been reaching out to some of you over the past couple of months, and what it's morphed into and what's come out of it. We just wanted to show you what we'll be taking to COP26 and how it shows how our raising ambition, what it translates to on the ground. So I'm going to actually ask if Diana, if you could share the QR code and see if people would like to just see if they can actually get into it on the screen. And what we're doing is putting these in little business card format so we can hand it out as a delegation. Diana will also put a link to the actual website, so you don't need to use the QR code. If it's not working for you, just click on the link. And it says that we are sharing the screen. Is there an image coming up? So
no image. Why don't we come back to that, Anu? We'll just take. Oh, there we go.
There we are. So basically, it's a little business card that says "Climate Ready Hawaii," and on the other side, what are you waiting for? So don't wait. Just put your phone up there and see if it can capture anything. And if not, we've got a link in the chat. And
it worked for me.
Did it work?
Yep.
Okay, good. I know that when we were trying it out earlier, it hadn't worked for you, but I'm glad it does. All right, so I think I'm just gonna send it over to Diana to just share on the screen what you actually see very briefly. And what we're hoping to do, there may be some edits or links, more links that you want to add. So we're standing by tomorrow, Diana and I, just to add those all day tomorrow. If you want to send me anything, I know many of you have already sent me something, but if there's anything else you would like Hawaii to take, just please send it in, and you'll see what it looks like in just a second here as we get onto the link in the chat. Let's see. So if you just give me a 3 seconds here, I think we'll be able to put it in there. Let's see. Sorry, my production is lacking a little bit here. Where's the dolly grip? Okay. Okay, looks like we have a little bit of a screen freeze going here. If you give me a second, I'll put the link in.
Why don't I just take a moment to see if the commission members have any questions?
Yes.
On this. And let's see. I guess raise your hand if you have a question. And otherwise, any comments? Anyone from the public want to make any comment here? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So Anu, back to you.
All right, give me a second. Just putting it in there. Sorry, guys. Okay, there's the link. And it should take you to our site where we have put everything up in 5 buckets. And I'm going to do a screen share.
Diana's screen got a screen share up, so
yeah, I'm gonna. Her screen's frozen. So can you see my screen?
Yes.
Can you see like something decent on there? I hope it's not what I was watching.
We can see Mauka to Makai.
Okay, good. All right. So essentially what we've got here, folks, is, we're looking at the high impact actions, like really what's going down at the ground level, like what your departments and your offices are doing in these buckets that the commission has provided statements on: mitigation, adaptation, equity, sequestration, and resilience. And each of these then goes off to, talking about, et cetera. And then as you get into mitigation itself, we've got here, the OPIHI is really our highlights, like what you have been already doing. And then the OHIA are high impact actions, what you're hoping to do in the next 12 to 18 months. And so we've got, the lead by example through energy audit for vehicles and a digital office. So things like that, we've got them in here. And for some of these, we do have links that we could find. Let me see if I can quickly. So for example, here, City and County of Honolulu, your first climate action plan. And then, we take it to that particular action plan. So just showing you, the buckets we've got here and the kinds of things. If you want to take a quick look at it, later after this meeting and a little bit tomorrow and send us anything back, would love to see it. So that's all I have right now. If there are any questions, and I'll stop my screen share.
Thanks so much. All right, any other follow-up questions? Go ahead and reach out to Anu, or you can put them in the chat. And this is, as you can tell, a living document. So we want to keep it up to date, and we want to recognize all the work you are doing and want to do. So I think this is a great way to share all of that. And again, please help us keep it current. All right.
I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who, put up with my pestering so that we could make this happen. So
Yes,
thank you.
it obviously does have your country, everyone's contributions in it already to the extent we're able to. So thanks so much. That's a great way to share what we're doing. All right, I'm going to just move on to the item 5 on the agenda, Hawaii's climate actions, our informational update. And again, this is what you all are doing. So this is our time to learn and share from what we are all doing. And I'm just going to go through the list here and ask people who are present to just give a short update to folks about this. So first is mitigation tools for reducing vehicle miles traveled, which is a focus of the commission. And I don't think we have anybody here on this one today, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry, we don't have an update yet. We needed to do a little more work on that. So we'll just, if you don't mind, Chair, go to the next.
Okay, and the next one is a framework for social and climate vulnerability, which is also a commission focus. So do we have the UH Institute for Sustainability and Resilience?
That's
I'm right
right.
here, Chair. McKenna Kaufman here.
Great. You want to go ahead with your update?
Yes, absolutely. And I can scale this to how much time. Anu, I know you wanted to say a few words to start, as this is a commission project. So why don't you start and I'll get my screen shared.
Okay, that sounds good. Do you have screen sharing permission? I just gave it to you. Are you able to see it?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, so it's my pleasure to provide the context and background for this project, which began with the Commission's findings on equity. And I think most folks were here. I'm just going to put our here in the chat. I'm just going to put a link to our equity statement. So there we are. And so this was actually, the statement was actually the outcome of a permitted interaction group of the commission. And it came up with a couple of things, which is recommended that we use a vulnerability framework that is appropriate for Hawaii and incorporate cultural responsiveness, reflect Indigenous voices and customary law practices to identify any inequitable distribution of benefits, burdens, and processes caused by climate change impacts and policy. And then also recognize and address the inequitable distribution of benefits, burdens, and processes by incorporating equity considerations into their planning for their, meaning the government agencies, planning, policy development, and implementation for climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and resilience. And so really it's that first part of actually describing such a framework with the UH team that we have been going forward with input from all commission departments and partners, basically looking at who is most vulnerable to what and how, and what this framework in Hawaii would look like. So here is our sort of project team, if you will. With the University of Hawaii, we've got Dr. McKenna Kaufman, Dr. Suwan Shen, and Maya Shervheim. And then on the Climate Commission side, along with me, we had two supervistas who were helping, James McKellen and Riviere Wood, who both of whom will be also presenting to you. So with that, it's over to you, McKenna. I think the second slide actually shows just our equity statement, mission statement, I should say, not the equity statement. That's just a reminder.
Thanks, Anu. And I know that, so my screen is sharing properly, right? You're not seeing the messy other stuff on my screen, correct? Okay.
Yeah, you're looking good. And so is your
good.
slide. Yeah.
You never know when you have so many monitors. So just really quickly, what the UH research team has been helping kind of further this work that came out of the permitted interaction group is to really think about what are the quantitative metrics that we can use to better understand the human dimensions of climate change vulnerability, broken down into different kinds of climate change shocks and stressors. And And what are the merits of those sort of quantitative data indicator approaches, as well as what are some of their limitations. And so we've, and just to go a little bit into, so why are we thinking, how are we thinking about vulnerability? It's really in terms of what is adaptive capacity. And this is to some extent individual, household level, as well as community level, right? And systems level. So there's different sort of layers of adaptive capacity. What is the sensitivity? Again, different sort of levels of sensitivity. And then your exposures, right? And these are the climate change shocks and stressors that we're focusing on. And there we're starting with the City Climate Change Commission's recent sort of parsing out of what are the most relevant direct climate change shocks and stressors for Hawaii. And I say direct because we know that these can have cascading impacts as well, but these are sort of their first order effects, right? And this is published in the City Commission's Climate Change and Financial Risk Guidance, if anybody wants to find it. But sort of starting with these and saying, how do we think about the data and indicators for vulnerability relative to these? And understanding vulnerability within the context of a system. And here we're sort of drawing off of Blakey's framework of thinking about kind of that first order of unsafe conditions, which are the interventions that people most often talk about, but then also the dynamic pressures and the root causes that I think we're increasingly talking about, which is important. And then layer onto that the lens of climate change and how do we use that to understand changes in vulnerability into the future. We aren't starting from scratch with this data. There are actually quite a few existing tools. Most of them are compilation of indicators or indices, in this case, sort of aggregate data that are put together for the purpose of showing kind of ranking scores of vulnerability, right? And so we have been having meetings with folks to understand, are people using these in their work, right? Are they helpful or not? We've gotten a range of different kinds of feedback so far, which is really interesting. The ways that people have been able to operationalize these existing indicators and data, and the ways that people might want to but can't, or the ways that they just don't feel like they're useful at all because they're not at the right scale. So this is where we're at in terms of having current conversations. And we had, as Anu said, a larger kickoff meeting with commission members as well as partners. With this, I'm going to pass it over to James to talk a little bit about the work that he did in really getting us to understand the ways that these existing indices are created. James, I'll pass it to you.
Great, thanks, McKenna. Yep, so here we'll just show a brief example of how these indicators are used within a vulnerability index tool. So this slide is from the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index tool. The data is pulled from the US Census, and most vulnerability frameworks and indices utilize US Census data due to its accessibility and the amount of comprehensive community information it provides. The methodology for the CDC SVI tool is borrowed by a lot of other tools as well, making it a main building block tool and one of interest for this project. So the CDC tool compiles the census data indicators into 4 themes: socioeconomic status, household composition and disability, minority status and language, and housing type and transportation. And then using a statistical method called the principal component analysis, these indicators themes are reported together to create a social vulnerability index score on a percentile ranking from the 0 to 1 scale, with 1 representing the highest score of social vulnerability. And so here you can see the SVI scores on a temperature map across Oahu to get a sense of the existing inequities on the island. The darker shaded census tracts represent areas with higher vulnerability. And so we've highlighted a census tract on the west side of Oahu in pink to give a sense of a community with a reported high vulnerability score of 0.95, which is almost as high as the scale goes. And as you can see, the neighboring census tracts are shaded in blue, illustrating that this area has overwhelmingly high areas of vulnerability. And now if we jump to the next slide, you'll see we highlighted another census tract in pink on the east side near Kailua. And this census tract has an SVI score of 0.05. There's almost a complete opposite score from the previous one. And it represents a very low, almost non-existent level of vulnerability. And while it's possible to dive deeper into the underlying indicators and explanations for these disparities, we just hope that this visual provides a clearer snapshot into the extreme inequitable vulnerabilities that exist across just one island in Hawaii. And this highlights the importance of really understanding community vulnerability at the most granular level possible, and not just by a single county or island. For the next slide, please. So this final image is from the Oahu Social Vulnerability Index tool, which was developed by the city and counties of Honolulu's Resilience Office. And I'll just note here that the vulnerability temperature map looks very similar to the CDC SVI one because it uses similar methods, as well as US Census data. However, the tool has added an additional 5th layer called exposure to hazards, which includes tsunami evacuation zones, flood zones, hurricane storm surge, and sea level rise exposure area. And this additional theme is included into the analysis to generate a more Oahu specific vulnerability score. And we wanted to highlight this tool because it's a great example of building off of existing frameworks and tools and including more localized data to better understand the social and climate vulnerabilities in Hawaii. And so the work on this project and with the help of our partners, we intend to use the best practices from all the existing tools and frameworks to create a more statewide, localized understanding of vulnerability in Hawaii. And with that, I'll pass it back to McKenna. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Thanks for your work on that. And just a quick note, just to add to what James was saying, I mean, I think one of the interesting things about the CDC Social Vulnerability Index is it gives some sense of adaptive capacity and the spatial distribution of adaptive capacity. And then if you look at the Oahu SOVI, that's layering on exposure, right? And so I think we want to also get a sense of, like, when we look at different kinds of climate change shocks and stressors, how does exposure, and then the thing that's missing right now is sensitivity, right? And sensitivity could be things like having only one roadway. How do we start to bring in that information to help aid decision-making on a more spatial granular basis? So moving forward, the kinds of things we will be working on are really to understand, I think a key thing is, what is the trade-off of being an aggregated index versus, separate indicators? How do we think about aggregation in terms of making more of the data or obscuring important data, right? As well as, how can we combine these vulnerability data indicators and indices with information on things like exposure, and then I'll also add sensitivity to that. And one of the important pieces of data that comes very much out in, I think, the maps you just saw that James showed you, as well as the literature on best practices, is that poverty, or the flip of that is income, right, really is a meta indicator. And how do we understand that as a meta indicator in the broader context of responding to climate change shocks and stressors? So these are the kinds of questions this project is aimed at getting to. Very much from a data-centered perspective on what's available and what's not available. And we will hopefully follow up. Thank you for the time.
Okay. That is great information. Did we cover all of that, Anu?
Yeah, if there are any questions on that.
All right, any questions on that? Well, I'll tell you what, let's go through all of the updates, and then we can just overall see if there are any questions. The third update is from Kauai County Planning Department on using sea level rise, the sea level rise exposure area as a regulatory tool.
Thanks, Chair Case, members of the commission. Kyle on behalf of Kauai's report. I'll make it relatively brief. Sorry, I don't have a PowerPoint. But in essence, with the sea level rise viewer, Kauai, other counties have been trying to really figure out how to thread that needle of using it from more than just a policy tool, but an actual regulatory tool. I think it's been pretty obvious Maui has taken a bite out of to try to figure out how to use the red line or the erosion data as a regulatory mechanism, and is going through their process. Kauai didn't feel that as appropriate on our side to go after the red line because we have what is arguably one of the most robust shoreline setback ordinances that covers almost all of that red line area. Dr. Fletcher and his team are actually mapping all of our shoreline setbacks for our beaches to see if it's leaving some of that red line, erosion line in the sea level rise bureau out. And we hope to have that mapped soon. But knowing that our shoreline setback ordinance accounts for the projected 3.2 foot sea level rise erosion hazard already, Kauai has embarked on trying to figure out the other two hazards, which are the high wave run-up, the annual high wave run-up projected to happen with sea level rise, and the passive flooding. And I apologize, some of you guys were at HCPO's directors panel. This will be redundant to that. I'm going to say the same thing. In looking at the hazard line for high wave run-up and passive flooding, unlike the erosion line, which in perpetuity, that will be where land will be underwater from here on out. The high wave run-up and passive flooding will be, episodic events where with sea level rise, these hazards will be created. And so we have with those hazards, it's not on the sea level rise viewer right now when you actually log on to the website, but within that, we have the data for the depths of passive flooding and high wave run-up. Excuse me. And so knowing the depths of where we will be within this century with 3.2 feet level of sea rise, right? We're trying to figure out, well, some of these we should try and retreat structures out. But granted, unlike erosion, these will be episodic events that you can mitigate by not just retreating, but possibly by elevating, much like the flood program has for areas in the floodplain. Granted, we know that the floodplain management programs under FEMA are not addressing sea level rise, and therefore are in many cases grossly inadequate in their mitigation for future events when it comes to high rain events. So we're trying to figure out, like, we know the depths with sea level rise for high wave run-up and passive flooding. We know what it'll be this century. Why shouldn't we be already requiring via a regulatory mechanism to, at a bare minimum, if not move out, elevate up to accommodate for those depths, and trying to figure out what is the most legally feasible manner in which we can impose that regulation based on the data. So we actually hired SSFM several months ago to kind of do an overview of approaches that municipalities are taking or looking at taking to address sea level rise and those hazard mitigations. They've come back to us with a report. Within that report are a series of approaches that municipalities or regions are looking at. Nothing that's been really adopted per se. The one that is really the closest to adoption is at the commission level is the Boston approach to dealing with sea level rise. And so Boston has basically generated maps in which they're looking at specifically regulating via a zoning floodplain, a zoning sea level rise district, in which they're taking the base flood elevation, adding 3.2, they accept the same amount of sea level rise as Hawaii does, adding 3.2 feet to that. And then depending on the type of building, adding 1 or 2 feet of freeboard, sorry about that. So in some scenarios, they're adding, 4 to 5 feet on top of the base flood elevation to accommodate for sea level rise projections. We think it's probably the closest we've seen from a municipality coming up with a regulatory paradigm or program to approach high wave run-up and passive flooding. We've got a couple questions for them. We really want to iron out the details on how they did this and why they took the 3.2 feet versus the actual projected flood elevations of those impacts. We're not sure if maybe they didn't have that data. We do have that data. So if we attempted to put, say, a 3.2 foot on every single proposal in the Slorexa hazard areas, that would make some sense if it's actually projected to have 3.2 feet of depth. But if it has a lower depth, or more conservatively, if it has a higher depth, say it's projected to have a 5 foot depth in the passive flooding area within the century, why would we only be putting 3.2 feet? And particularly, why did they adopt it as a zoning layer and as opposed to not updating their floodplain management program? So there's a bunch of questions we have to try and figure out how Boston got to where they're at. And we're actually setting up meetings. We're supposed to be having meetings with Boston in the next few weeks to try and go over our program versus their program and see where the two programs might be able to borrow from each other, more us borrowing from them, if anything. But that's kind of the work. So we don't have anything set for you folks to review. But we do, I'd say, with everything going okay and us being able to touch bases with Boston, I'd anticipate we're about 2 to 3 months out from having a draft proposal of a draft proposal for a regulatory mechanism for the highway runoff and passive flooding hazards in the sea level rise viewer. We still are going to definitely be running it through our litigation team as well as land use attorneys. And we've also got Sea Engineering kind of waiting in the cuffs to kind of help us analyze it from an engineering standpoint. So that's kind of where we are. We don't have a final product or a draft product for you folks to review yet, but we hope to in the next 2 to 3 months.
Thanks so much, Kaina. That's a fascinating example of real cross jurisdiction collaboration, looking way beyond our borders. That's terrific. Let me go back briefly to the UH folks, Dr. Kaufman, and they may not be able to stay for the whole meeting. So I just wanted to see if anyone had any questions or comments on their presentation. Okay, none for now, but I know there's a lot of interest in the work you're doing. So again, thank you so much for all of that work. All right, we will move on to number 4, Maui County Planning Department, putting regulatory measures to work, shoreline rules and strategic retreat.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm sorry for whatever reason, Zoom doesn't seem to like me today, and my video hasn't seemed to work the whole meeting, which is fine. So, but I'll proceed ahead anyway. To make the best use of the time, I'll be talking mainly from prepared notes. First off, the shoreline rules in Maui County have recognized sea level rise for a few decades now. And shoreline rules establish setbacks for new development and substantial repairs to existing development. Over 20 years ago, the county recognized a clear trend of coastal erosion. And in 2003, the Maui Planning Commission established localized setbacks based upon historical aerial imagery for the more populated portions of Maui Island shorelines. Early this last decade, about 10 years ago, the planning department started to work to also factor in increasing sea level rise going forward. And then the commission's sea level rise vulnerability and adaptation report provided great data and tools for that. So as a number of you have heard for quite a while, based upon that report and then the information that put out in the supporting information available in the PAC-iOS viewer, we proposed new shoreline setbacks based on the red lines depicted in the coastal erosion layer for the overall sea level rise exposure area where there is such a layer. We're calling that red line the erosion hazard line, and we're proposing setbacks 40 feet Mauka of that line. Now that would move most current setbacks considerably Mauka. Since proposing that, we've done a lot of public outreach and gotten a lot of feedback, with most of the negative feedback coming from affected landowners. We're still working to address the feedback, otherwise fine-tune the proposed rules. We may do some more outreach and then get draft rules back to the Maui Planning Commission in 2022, next year, for required hearings and hopeful adoption. Now, the subject here was going to be the shoreline rules and strategic retreat. So let me go into that a little bit, because just strategic retreat generally refers to movement of development and critical assets, Mauka, to retreat from sea level rise before they might be significantly affected by it. Maui County is now actively pursuing this in at least 4 ways, 2 of them regulatory, and we keep looking for other ways as opportunities arise. First, over time, setbacks lead to strategic retreat, as new development is only allowed further Mauka and repairs to existing development is limited and eventually abated or eliminated. Development within Makai development eventually gets removed. But in addition to that, For a while, the county has been identifying work in the sea level rise exposure area or MALCA of either inside or MALCA of setbacks to be work in what we call an environmentally sensitive area. That triggers a need for mitigation under the county's special management area rules and HRS Chapter 205A titled Coastal Zone Management. The county has recently been comprehensively seeking mitigation, whether proposed work is inside or outside of setbacks, such as in major portions of the county's coastal areas where the sea level rise exposure area does not include a coastal erosion layer or setbacks based upon it. So beyond work we've been doing on the shoreline rules, which just affect limited areas of Maui Island, that adds attention to all of Molokai, Lanai, and East Maui, where those areas are in the Slorexa. Mitigations are addressed to specific features of a proposed project and often include retreat, such as programs to decommission development that's inside a hazard area or otherwise relocate the activity MALCA when threatened by sea level rise. Another example recently used by the Molokai Planning Commission that kind of speaks to what Kaina was talking about. We're all, in addition to the three major layers in the Slorexa, we're also looking at areas that would be affected by 1% chance flood on top of a 3-foot sea level rise. So, for example, the University of Hawaii was proposing an education center in Molokai in Kaunakakai, and unfortunately, Kaunakakai is subject to the sea level rise exposure area, even though the setbacks are much smaller on Molokai right now, only 40 feet. So, with the UH Education Center, the commission applied a condition, and we've met with UH folks and their design team a few times so that they will be providing protective measures for flood hazards that go well above the current county standard, which is 1% freeboard. So in that case, for example, we are looking at impacts of 3.2 plus 1, like you're talking about Kaina for Boston, and then mitigating against that. So these are a few other ways we're using regulatory approaches beyond just the shoreline setbacks. For a number of us in the planning department and others in the county, strategic retreat is always on our mind, including beyond regulatory approaches. We keep looking for other ways as opportunities arise, such as a takeoff on an old planning tool called transfer development rights that came up not too long ago, in which we may work for removal of some visitor accommodations from the sea level rise exposure area and transfer those rights, MALCA of the hazard area. But right now, Maui is comprehensively assessing infrastructure that's at risk from sea level rise so as to have it retreat over time. And we're including strategic retreat policies in our various community plan updates. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That is the nitty gritty of how we actually implement here. You guys are really plowing ahead with it. So thank you so much. Next up, we have Hawaii County Planning Department with an update on making building codes work for climate change.
Aloha, Chair Case, aloha members. Zendo Kern here from the Planning Department. Yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about, do building codes work? It's typically not what you find housed in the Planning Department. I have a pretty broad range, built many of homes, developed subdivisions, etc. So I also think it's important to take a look at things from outside of the box. Sometimes when you're that person working in it all the time, you don't see the blind spots. I want to preface this with, I'm really not saying that I'm right about any of this. This is discussional purposes. Would love to have a robust discussion around this as things move forward. Looking for help, and again, hopefully the conversation will stimulate us to think about things in a different way in a world that's vastly changing. So I grew up very low income on the east side of Hawaii. We grew up completely off grid, about 3 miles from the closest power source or water source. So we were, all off grid, solar panels, battery backups, the whole nine. And what we started with was a 20 by 20 home, kind of typical for, your rural Big Island style back in the day. That area was not permitted. From there, a master bedroom was put on. From there, another bedroom. From there, some more space. And anyways, long story short was at the end of the day, we came up with probably around an 1,800 square foot home, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, nice workshop underneath, all single wall construction, not a glass window in the house, all screen. And it worked. The breeze flowed through there. It was comfortable. It was wonderful. You got to the sides, and the mosquitoes were so thick they'd carry you away. But what happened was in 1995 or so, Mayor Harry Kim at the time opened up an amnesty to people that had unpermitted buildings, and they said, "Hey, if you want to try to get your your home permitted, come on in. We're not going to ding you." And it took the fear factor away. Folks went in there and got the home fully permitted, completely legit. Home still stands, never a problem. So that home was permitted. So that's the story that kind of brings me from where I come from. Now I've built homes that are fully insulated, engineered to the max. I've seen the spectrum of it. And so I wonder, so what we're working on right now is I have one of our lead for Hawaii fellows, actually 2 of them working kind of tandemly, trying to gather data, trying to understand. Because there's two crises that we're in essence. We have climate, we have affordability. And the merger of these two together don't work. They don't jive on the surface, because what we're doing is we're increasing the cost of homes through climate adaptation, mitigation, et cetera. And meanwhile, at the same time, we're saying we need all these homes. Hawaii County is, over the next 5 years, paid for 13,000 units short. We also need farm worker housing. So what I wonder and I question is, with each one of these building code updates, there's obviously a clear increase in price. What's the carbon impact? What's the carbon impact per piece of plywood that's shipped to Hawaii? What's the carbon impact per, J-bolt that comes in, or box of nails, or bag of cement? It's easier to find the general cement and steel equation in the climate conversation. It equates to around 10% of our carbon emissions overall. And I think Hawaii is unique because we're importing things. And what I find is we're generally kind of coming with a one, or what I'm seeing over here, I'm going to speak mainly for Hawaii County. I think it crosses over some other counties, but a bit more of a one size fits all. We have building, we have the vertical, and we have the infrastructure side of it. And so I'm working on trying to find this data, and it's not really there at your fingertips. We're not quite there yet. We don't know what the carbon impact is for a piece of plywood coming over here. And so what I wonder is, each and every year, not every year, but each cycle, we increase our code, we increase our price, we increase our code, we increase our price. But as government, we like to say, housing's an issue, affordability is an issue, let's lower our prices, let's serve the people. But oftentimes we're moving in different directions. So is it possible to look at things differently? What we're seeing is, I see a lot of tiny home conversation, right? So it's kind of this how do we get smaller? And that might work for certain folks. It might help with our farm worker housing. It doesn't necessarily always work for the family. Do our codes work? Now, if you're on the shore, if you're in the coastal impact area, very similar to kind of like a vulnerability index, if you will, if you're in one of those areas, your code should probably be pretty close to what it is, maybe even ramped up. But if you're not, what's wrong with an older style of construction? What's wrong with the previous code? So where's the data is the question that I ask for Hawaii. Where's the data for Hawaii County that shows there's a need? How many people have died? How many roofs have fallen off? How many homes have crashed? I don't think that really exists. What we see is people living in plantation homes, still working great. What we see is people living in single wall homes, still working great. What we see is people living in homes that breathe and flow and actually are actionable, still working great. But if you want to build new, no. You need to bulletproof this thing to the next level. And often it's a thought around energy. How do we create more energy efficiency? And that's a conversation. But as we're seeing, we're moving into the alternate energy. That's changing. But I wonder if you were actually to break it down, this is what I'm hoping that we're going to be able to do, is break down the differential that you actually produce carbon-wise versus energy and the life cycle of that overall. What do those equate to? Because unless we're really able to bring these conversations together and find that area of affordability and carbon reduction, we'll lose if we don't solve for them both. Moving into, say, like the green infrastructure conversation, that's a bit easier. There's a bit more I guess maybe even less options, but more kind of practical. We're seeing that a lot more with trying to move away from the full curb gutter sidewalks, makes for more flexibility, cluster homes, etc. So we're really focusing on that too. I actually feel that that's a lot easier to solve than the building code equation. So I'm hoping that, one of the ideas that we have is a tiered system, where you have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, possibly. And then that would open up those codes for specific areas that worked. And it would also be a bit more market driven. Folks that might be coming in, they may be looking at a tier 1 house, very, very simple. Tier 2 might be a bit more. Tier 4 would be your, very nice, but nice, super, super to the max. And that would, I believe, open up possibility. It opens up a more of a dynamic system. And I think moving forward, that's really what it's gonna take. And so I'm challenging myself, I'm challenging my counterparts in other departments. I'm going to challenge all of us to think in a different way, to look at things differently, because it's easy to talk about. It's very hard to do. And it's even harder to get that mid-level management on board. And so can we not have the appropriate code for the appropriate place? You got your farm worker housing, for example. Does that need to be the current code that we have? Is there data around that to support that farm worker? Would we rather not have a farm worker living in a home paid for? Because while I grew up very, very poor, the difference is that the way that my parents were able to do it, albeit kind of a little bit too far left, it should come up more in the middle, things were paid for. That allowed the stress at home to be much less. That allowed them to actually be home. So while I had to deal with what I had to deal, there was still this home. And I think a lot of folks, a lot of kids these days don't have that same situation. There's so much stress around just home ownership alone. There's a lot of psychological challenges that go along with that. And part of it comes through the decisions that we made. Part of that comes through our code. So how do we tackle both of these at the same time? That's it.
Thanks so much. That's those kind of data we should be sharing. The data that exists and the data that we still need are a really important part of this conversation. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Next up is Hawaii Department of Transportation on the state fleet transition.
Thank you, Chair Case, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jade Butai, Director of the State Department of Transportation. We procured a service contract to replace light-duty vehicles. This was possible because of Act 144, Session Laws Hawaii 2019, which allows agencies to contract for vehicle procurement or associated capital investments in charging or fueling infrastructure, similar to facility-based energy services contracts. The service contract could be used by almost any state and local government agencies, executive departments, the City and County of Honolulu, Hawaii Health Systems Corporation, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, Honolulu Authority for Rapid Transportation, the Senate, Judiciary, County of Hawaii, and among others have signed a cooperative purchasing agreement with the State of Hawaii State Procurement Office and are authorized to utilize the contract. House Bill 552, Act 74, Session Laws Hawaii 2021, which calls for the replacement of all light-duty motor vehicles at state agencies with zero emission fleet by December 31, 2035. The contract could be used as one of the tools to meet the mandate. And we're implementing a pilot program to electrify transit fleet with zero emission buses purchases for 3 counties that we support for transit services, Kauai, Maui, and Hawaii Transit Systems. The program includes federal transit agency formula and grant funds, as well as the Volkswagen Settlement Fund that will be available from Hawaii State Energy Office, possibly fund from HECO's Charge Up e-bus pilot program and local match from counties. We are looking at procuring 12 battery electric vehicles, four buses for each of the counties that I mentioned. And then the preliminary route modeling is complete. Battery electric bus specifications are being developed. The pilot bus operation performance will be used to create a fleet transition plan for the transit agencies. And the pilot program is projected to have emission savings as well. The operation of 12 zero emission buses will result to net greenhouse gases saving of 165.8 short tons per year. It is assumed that 100% renewable energy is used for bus charging. Using the preliminary route modeling data and extending that to cover current service routes, complete fleet conversion to zero emission buses of all 3 counties will likely lead to at least 15,000 short tons of greenhouse gases reduction per year. That's all I have, Chair. And then you want me to go to the next topic?
That's all. That's terrific. That's a lot of progress and analysis, and very concrete, headed in the direction that we all need to go. Thank you so much. Okay, you're next also for climate adaptation plan implementation.
To achieve a resilient transportation system, we focus across all 3 modal divisions to adopt sustainable operational practices and to establish an outcome focused approach to decision making for transportation project development and delivery that supports sustainability, environmental stewardship. The action plan focuses on potential risks and impacts to state roads and bridges from severe weather hazards, including landslides, lava flow, floods, wildfires, and sea level rise. The plan also offers strategies for a more resilient highway system going forward. And we have several programs focused on providing alternate transportation options and reducing single occupancy vehicle travel. The transportation demand management, TDM, strategies include ride-sharing programs, which offer the least expensive way to reduce rush hour traffic congestion by moving more people in fewer cars. High occupancy vehicle lanes and zipper lanes, carpools and school pool matching services are some of the TDM strategies we have implemented. We have a pilot program to connect rural communities statewide through broadband. This will provide communities with telework and mobility options beyond that of vehicular travel. We've also implemented teleworking options, which will reduce peak hours commute traffic. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you again for all of that outline. That's a big part of the equation. All right, Powering Passcode Task Force, the Hawaii State Energy Office.
Aloha, Chair Case. Aloha, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the Powering Past Coal Task Force. I would just like to note too that the Energy Office is working with DOT and many stakeholders on the various mitigation activities that have been discussed to date. And Zendo, you're welcome to contact my office for discussion on building codes. So on the task force meeting, or on the task force, just as a reminder, I presented to the commission on April 7th to give an update on, at the time, they just created a task force. This is a task force that governor issued by executive order, which is 2021-01. It established the Powering Past Coal Task Force to coordinate, align, and facilitate the efforts needed to safely decommission Hawaii's last coal plant in September 2022, replace it with renewable energy, and ensure grid stability. And just to note for everyone, we now have since then a web page stood up at energy.hawaii.gov/PPCTF, which are the initials for Powering Past Coal Task Force. And on that website, we have background on the situation, and we include a master schedule of the various projects that are underway to replace the energy from the coal plant, namely 8 solar plus battery storage projects and 1 battery storage project that are utility scale, as well as multiple programs for rooftop solar and battery for homes and businesses. So we're now about 10 months away from the retirement of the coal plant, and a lot of work has been done, but a lot more needs to happen. One of the key steps in this whole process has been the permitting. And I want to say that the agencies involved, in particular DPP, has done a big lift to get a lot of these utility scale projects where they need to be. Most of the projects are in the tail end of their discretionary permitting. And as a coordinating body, our job as the task force has been to help agencies stay aware of these projects and their timelines. But in no way is this task force a policy-making body and getting in front of how decisions should be made by the agencies that have discretionary permits. What it looks like with the timeline right now is that the window after the coal plant retires, that September to December 2022 period, we should be good for reliability and power. And then with the projects under construction after that, into 2023 in the summer to fall, we have some questions about reliability. We should have the power, but there will be a slight decrease in reliability that we're working to address by, again, working on the schedule of these projects. I'm not talking about necessarily blackouts or anything like that, but just it's a question of degree in terms of how much reliability would we have in terms of a cushion between our normal operating levels and backup power. So this is something we're paying a lot of attention to, and it keeps getting increasingly more complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and the global situation is actually exacerbating it, which underscores why we are engaging at the COP. So one thing that's come up is the supply chain issues. We heard about it in some other contexts. So right now there's a global supply problem with shipping. Prices of shipping are going up. Solar panels are not being shipped, or the prices of those solar panels are becoming, or the shipping of the solar panels is becoming too expensive. And so both rooftop and utility scale installers are choosing to wait to order solar panels. Also, there's a question going on with tariffs. So if you've seen in the news, about a year or two ago, President Trump put tariffs on solar panels from China, which were considered, they were dumping solar panels on the international market. And since then, a lot of production has shifted to Southeast Asia. So Malaysia, Vietnam, and Thailand are now where about 70 to 80% of the world's solar panels come from. And there's a petition before the US Department of Commerce to apply the tariffs on China also to those 3 countries. And if those tariffs were to be applied to them, then pretty much most of our solar projects would stall out one way or another. And in fact, we've already had 1 or 2 projects announce that they're going to wait until the resolution of this tariffs question before they proceed with building their projects. So this is a direct matter for Hawaii's interests that are both national and international. And being able to engage on the world stage and let folks know how much these decisions would affect us is important to us being able to achieve our goals on the ground. Because it's, as you know, Governor said, it's not enough just to make an announcement of a high level target or ambition, but it's the on the ground implementation that matters. And so we're chasing that down at every level that we can to retire the coal plant reliably and do something that really nowhere else is done, is replace that coal plant energy only with renewable energy in the form of solar and battery storage. So with that, I conclude the report, and Chair, let me know if you have questions or from anyone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And I know a lot of people here are doing work with the Powering Past Coral Task Force, and it has been really terrific coordination and making sure everyone knows what's coming down the pipeline. Next up is the Trillion Trees Initiative, Department of Land and Natural Resources.
Aloha, Chair. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Commission. I'm Leah Laramie with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and hopefully you folks have all heard about this latest initiative that was announced, because we got some really great press on it. But Governor Ige, on behalf of the Department of Land and Natural Resources, Department of Transportation, and Department of Defense, has pledged to conserve, preserve, and plant 100 million trees over the next decade. We're doing that primarily through protecting existing forests with watershed fences. We're also conserving private land through legal protections, planting trees to restore existing forests, planting trees to reclaim unused rural lands where forests used to exist, planting trees to advance agroforestry, planting trees in urban areas, and facilitate natural regeneration. So as I said, primarily this initiative will be accomplished through protecting existing forests. So we are estimating to protect about 100,000 acres from feral ungulates in our watersheds. And we also have a few land acquisition projects in the works. And finally, we are planning on planting about 50,000 trees annually for a total of 500,000 trees, new trees planted. Funding for this is hopefully going to be through a collaboration of federal and state funds, as well as some private monies that are going to be accessible through this pledge. So the pledge is actually part of the Trillion Trees Initiative that was spurred from the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Protections, and the World Economic Forum launched this Trillion Tree Initiative, which is international and has pledges from many private and public entities, including large corporations such as Salesforce, American Savings Bank, Amazon, who are all funding tree planting and protection initiatives throughout the world. So we're hopefully going to be able to tap into this. There's a question for DOT. Okay, that's not for me. Yeah, so that's basically just a really quick update. Wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that and answer any questions if you had them for me.
Thank you so much, Leah. And I can tell from personal experience that if you wonder if this is pie in the sky numbers, it's not. It's very carefully calculated based on achievable targets, but an important, again, part of the overall climate equation. To be able to suck up that carbon through planting trees. Okay, next up is the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, statewide sea level rise adaptation coordination of state facilities.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Co-Chair. This is Justine Ihipali, and just wanting to provide a brief update on Act 178 from Session Laws of Hawai'i 2021 relating to sea level rise adaptation. Just for folks that don't know, the bill required OPSD in coordination with state agencies with operational responsibilities over state facilities to one, identify existing and planned facilities that are vulnerable to sea level rise, flooding impacts, and natural hazards. Two, assess options to mitigate the impacts of sea level rise to those facilities, and also submit annual reports to the governor, legislature, and the commission. So we are required to submit the report that is highlighting the vulnerability and mitigation assessments for state facilities, as well as the progress towards implementing sea level rise in future plans, programs, and capital improvement needs and decisions. There was no appropriation for this, and so this is supported by the State Coastal Zone Management Program staff. We held a kickoff meeting on September 24th, 2021. We do want to thank DAGS and HIEMA for providing a lot of the data for different separate initiatives that were done previously. And that was a lot of help. What we're doing now is verifying the data accuracy among 14 departments and sub-agencies. By the annual reporting deadline, 20 days before the next session, we're expecting to have a preliminary assessment of the facilities in relation to the different scales of sea level rise exposure. In the state multi-hazard mitigation plan of 2018, they did identify the number of facilities under 3.2, but we're hoping to do a more granular analysis with the different exposures in terms of the 0.5 and then 1 and then 2, and then perhaps adding the NOAA sea level rise exposure area for 6 feet. At this time, the scope does not account for facilities on state lease lands, unencumbered lands, county infrastructure, and private utility services. We have reached out to some of the private utility services to better understand where they are relating to sea level rise adaptation planning, recognizing that we can have these shells of facilities, but without the support services relating to the county infrastructure and the private infrastructure, they're simply buildings. So that's the update relating to Act 178. And you should receive a report from us later this year, if not early January.
Thanks so much, Justine. And I'm sure, like I have, several of you have gotten these inquiries. And so we really appreciate you gathering this data on state facilities. And, you know, it does go beyond that. And we have vulnerability in state related areas beyond facilities. This is all really important data for us to collect. And next up, we also have Office of Planning and Sustainable Development on the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan publication.
Thank you, co-chairs. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to present. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Is everyone able to see the slideshow? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Well, I just wanted to provide a quick update of the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan. Moving on to the next screen, we're going to be quickly discussing the process and public outreach as to why we are updating the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan. Pursuant to law in the Hawaii State Planning Act, we actually have a section now where it codifies the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan to be rescoped and serve as the state of Hawaii's climate and sustainability action plan. The Office of Planning was tasked to update this plan in 2019, and we are proud to share with the commission today that we did publish it earlier this June in 2021, and we will be committing to updating this plan every 10 years. So we'll probably be doing this again at the end of the decade. In terms of the process of what we have performed over the last year and a half, we saw a wonderful opportunity to align the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan, both as a climate and sustainability strategic action plan, to align with both the UN Sustainable Development Goals as well as the UN Decade of Action, both which have terms to expire by 2030. This is the decade of action between now and 2020 and 2030. So in that alignment, we attempted to align over 150 state laws, state plans, county and sustainability plans as well, the Aloha Plus Challenge, and of course, the Sustainable Hawaii Initiative, all to fill within the framework of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals and how that serves back to the state of Hawaii, all with the final product of the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan. So just to provide a brief overview, this new plan is the first publication, pretty much showcasing all of those Hawaii legal and statutory sustainability and climate targets that are within our laws that needed to be either achieved in the year 2000 or upcoming by the year 2030, or even more far out by the year 2050. So this is the first publication, if you will, aggregating all of that information as a one-stop shop. So I would encourage the commissioners to take a look at the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan to better understand our legal and statutory sustainability and climate obligations moving forward. In terms of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, we've actually published many pages inclusive of the SDGs, specifically for the climate action SDG. I just wanted to give you a quick overview here on pages 75 and 76, which this publication actually aligned all of the state-wide planning efforts and county planning efforts going on into our climate adaptation, climate mitigation, and sustainable development moving forward. So again, more of a bit of a one-stop shop of alignment, trying to sort all of this information moving forward. Finally, going into recommendations, this important state climate and sustainability plan suggests 8 focus areas recommending for the period of 2020 to 2030 pursuant to the law, which task us to provide those recommendations. They are listed in front of you, from ranging from promoting a sustainable economic recovery all throughout to institutionalizing sustainability throughout government, as well as in preserving our natural environment while perpetuating traditional and ecological values. I'd encourage commissioners to go in deeper and look at these focus areas. Specifically, each focus area of these 8 focus areas, there are 38 strategies. And of these 38 strategies, we are providing over 200 recommended actions for the 8 years ahead. So this, of course, we realize that the COVID-19 was a huge economic stressor for the state of Hawaii, and ways we can actually sustainably economically recover is through encouraging more local agricultural development and supporting our local farmers, as well as green youth workforce youth development, and more opportunities to reduce environmental footprinting within our tourism industries. Moving on into reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, the strategies are before you. Many of these align with the many efforts underway legally and statutorily to measure, manage, and plan for GHG reduction, as well as look for opportunities for sequestration efforts and promoting energy conservation, efficiency, and renewable clean energy. Another area where this commission may be interested, another focus area could be in the improvement of climate resilience, to specifically the strategies to integrate climate adaptation and resilient considerations into planning and implementation, as well as aligning these efforts into land use and increasing the resilience of vulnerable populations and impacts to climate change and other action stressors. Finally, to end this very quick presentation of this very comprehensive plan, wanted to leave the commission with this understanding that over the last year and a half, we did perform a very extensive, collaborative, and comprehensive analysis, both in working with all islands in terms of this virtual outreach during the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as working with over 65 state and county agencies in the review and drafting period of this very important state plan. So moving forward, working with those 8 focus areas, 38 strategies, and over 200 recommended actions, we need to definitely strategically prioritize our investments and align many of these efforts moving forward. And of course, as we are all, vital elements in this state government and county governments, as vulnerable islands in the middle of the Pacific, Kako is the most important thing that we need to do in terms of aggressively considering climate change in the next 8 years. This is the decade of action, so we need to move quickly and very efficiently through a collaborative effort to meet that realistic timeframe moving forward. If anyone has any questions relating to the Hawaii 2050 Sustainability Plan, feel free to contact me. It's also available online at hawaii2050.hawaii.gov. And if you would prefer a physical copy, please just let me know, and we'd be happy to share a physical copy with you all. Thank you so much for this time. Mahalo.
Thank you very much for that overview of the Hawaii 2050 sustainability plan. It's a lot of work to do during a COVID period, and appreciate your summary for everyone on it. Let's see, Department of Agriculture. Phyllis, did you want to talk about restorative aquaculture and soil health?
Yeah, just briefly, we are moving forward. We've contract services to do the regenerative and restorative aquaculture projects. It's going to be looking at native marine limu, planting, trying to get an assessment on native oyster restoration, fish pond restoration, wetland restoration, and see if there's opportunities to collaborate and scale it to also economic value or commercial value. Chair Case, you and I have talked about, this is something we wanted to work on, but we went ahead and just contracted to get the assessment done, and we'll be sharing that information with you. The department also is very active in a soil health initiative, and so we're working together with one of the farming organizations, Hawaii Farmers Union Foundation, and USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. There is a grant for new cooperative agreements for racial justice and equity, and because of the demographics of Hawaii's small farmers, we're pursuing to get grant funding so we can have resources for cover cropping and soil health initiatives to help with the carbon sequestration. That's it.
Thanks so much. Those are great initiatives that are very, very on the ground, detailed projects. So we look forward to working with you more on those. Any other members have any updates on climate actions? Luke Myers, Haima.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Chair. Can I share just a quick item on the screen?
Yeah.
See if I can,
yes, you can. Go ahead.
Bring this up properly. So one of the responsibilities of HIEMA, we have a number of resilience projects that include pre and post disaster hazard mitigation and recovery. And so we've had lots of conversations, today and in the past about how our projects, obviously, they don't know borders. And when we have specific incidents that are derived from the climate change perspective, it's really hard to kind of encompass those. Some of those are on the even 3, 5, 7, 10 decadal type. So one of the projects that we've been doing, obviously we have disaster projects from a number of climate related incidents and other. We've been building out a series of ArcGIS solutions to visualize these. So when we engage, in particular, this example here, our partners in Hawaii County, these little diamonds are actually public assistance projects from Hurricane Lane. And if you're familiar with the coast, the Hamakua coast, those are flood projects because we dumped 50 inches of rain on the slopes of Mauna Kea. But what we intend to do with these historically is to start looking at some of the past disasters that we've had open from Hurricane Azelle, recent flooding in March of this year, some of our fire management assistance grants, and start to show by watershed some of the connectivity with investments that we're making on the mitigation side and obviously from the long-term recovery. So Chair, maybe at the next meeting, we can kind of do a deep dive. We hope to expand this to all the counties. We've started to populate some of the other projects throughout the area. We definitely see a lot of connective tissue between some of these emergency management activities and obviously longer climate resilience. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. That's a super important piece of the puzzle, and you guys are at the front line of dealing with the impacts co-chair Mary Alice Evans, you noted his interest in presenting at the next meeting. So I'll leave that in your hands. Anyone else? Chair Lowen.
Well, are we on to questions or comments? I don't have a new information of my own to share, I guess.
Yeah, let me just double check. Anybody else have any updates? Otherwise, we'll go to Q&A and public comments. Okay. Okay, let's see. All right, I think go ahead, Chair Lowen.
Sure. I first just wanted to just say thank you to everyone, particularly DOT, to Director Butai, to Scott Glenn and Justine Nihipali. Just, we can make policy at the legislature, but it takes willing partners in the administration to implement it. And so much is happening. It's just really nice to see everyone kind of committed to seeing the same outcomes that we all hope for when we do our jobs at the legislature. And then I just wanted to comment, sorry to pick on Hawaii County, but it's my county also. And so I guess the comment about building codes is well taken. Like, I totally understand that, but I would just wonder what kind of, if you had a proposal of what kind of assurances would be put in place to make sure that like any savings were actually passed on to renters or buyers and not just, money saved for the developers or builders of homes. Because I mean, there are certain conditions that have changed. Like I have a home in Kona. I've been in the same home for 15 years. I didn't have air conditioning, and now I absolutely need air conditioning. It's hotter more days. And I think the data is there for that. If you went to the utility, you could see the data increasing for electricity use on hot days and increase in use of air conditioning. And so, having homes built with insulation and things like that, I think can be really important and like a huge cost savings to the people who occupy those homes. So I don't know. I mean, I'm just concerned about making sure we're not thinking about cutting corners to the point where it actually is hurting, not helping.
Yeah, happy to jump in there real quick. That's certainly not the case. It's finding that balance. It's about having that discussion. For example, in an area like that you're talking about, or like I used to live in Kapoho, insulation makes sense. Up at 1,100 foot elevation, built a home for my mom, put in radiant barrier. The home never warms up. And so it's really not about passing it on so the developers can make more. It's really, how do we make it so the startup families, the families that are trying to make it work, that work hard, should be able to own a home? How do we do that? So that's why this is really early in its conversation. I feel like I see it in my mind, but that's why I said I'm happy to be wrong in certain areas and want to have that robust conversation around it. But I think even just understanding where those metrics are to begin with helps that conversation on how then we bring it into a framework that does work for everybody. And that's one of the challenges that we have is big decisions that have effects. And that's why it's generally easier to stay on the side of, we'll just leave it the way that it is. It does that work. So I hear you loud and clear, and a lot more discussion. Nothing's happening really quickly. I'm still trying to figure out what the carbon impact for one piece of plywood is, or a container. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that. Other comments from commissioners or questions? If not, let's open it up to public testimony. Comments from members of the public who are in the meeting here.
Can I go?
Yes.
All right.
Please,
So hi.
please go ahead. I'll consider that a raised hand. Yeah.
Sorry, I couldn't find it for whatever reason this time.
Right.
So,
No. Works fine.
I want to commend everybody's great work. There are so many wonderful things happening, to sort of echo Representative Lowen. But I think also to echo Danielle Bass's presentation on the state stability plan, I am listening and wondering, is it enough, and how are we going to know? And I'm going to sort of draw from my experiences in transportation, and this is not to pick on the DOT, it's really more to just be illustrative, which is that switching over a lot of these transit vehicles and the fleet electrification is important, but it's not sufficient for what we're trying to do in this space. And how are we sort of checking in on that as a commission, as a community?
because that's one of the things that I sort of worry a bit more about, which is that, you know, we really need to get a lot of people out of their cars, and transportation, I guess last week is now, that's the #1 sector here in Hawaii. And fleet electrification is definitely important for the vehicles that are going to be on the road, but they can't be at the level we have them at right now. And I'm just trying to figure out, like, how do we incorporate those types of conversations and the actions that are sort of really needed, especially since it's a decade of action. Like, it's not just, we have a lot of great commitments and a lot of great things happening. I think you all have proven that, but I worry that it's not enough, and I'm not really sure where the space for that discussion is. And yeah, it's just an observation as someone who watches you all pretty regularly. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And do you mind just introducing yourself so we have you on the record?
My apologies. I thought I did in my head. Kathleen Rooney, Ulupono Initiative, Director of Transportation Policy and Programs.
Super. Thanks so much. All right. Any other questions, comments from testimony from the public? All right. Once again, thanks to everyone. This has become my favorite part of our Climate Commission meetings because it really is all of us sharing the nitty gritty of how we're going to get there. It just takes hard work in the trenches, and a lot. We've come a long ways, I will say, from kind of our first meeting where it was sort of like deer in the headlights to people just really digging in. So really appreciate that. Okay, our last agenda item, let's turn to that. Number 6, informational presentations on climate change and equity projects, featuring our AmeriCorps Vista Climate Ready Hawaii cohort. So looking forward to hearing all about your work.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just make a quick introduction of our wonderful Vistas. We have our first Climate Ready cohort this year. As the Commission knows, this is a cost share with AmeriCorps, and the Commission's budget pays for that cost share. And their time of service is coming to an end. So it's 6 of them working for a year. So that's like 1 person working for 6 years. So our second cohort, I hate to already talk about them before this one is gone, as we're almost there. We are close to finalizing. They will be starting in December, and we're finalizing a total of 10. So this first year we had 6, and then 10 in 7 offices and departments, including the 3 neighbor counties of Hawaii, Kauai, and Maui counties. So that's sort of one little, piece of good news there. But also first, our very first cohort, please join me in welcoming them and listen to their truly useful things that they've been doing with us. They've multiplied our capacity to do climate ready work. They're each going to provide a brief overview of the work they've done, individual and group projects for the Commission. And then you can see more on their profiles and projects on our website under High Vista on climate.hawaii.gov. And so please welcome them. They'll go one by one. So I'm going to send it over to you, Brittany.
All right, thank you, Anna. Just give me one moment to get my screen set up for sharing the presentation. Okay, so before we get started, I just wanted to give another mahalo to Co-Chair Evans and Co-Chair Case for allowing us to present and share the work that myself and my fellow cohort members have been doing this year. We're very excited to be able to show off what we've accomplished so far. So as Anu already said, my name is Brittany Key. I'm a climate adaptation research analyst, and I'm based at the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development, and more specifically within the statewide sustainability program. So first, I'd like to start off with the work that I've been doing for the Commission. I began with an Equity Foundations project at the beginning of this year that the basis for actually came out of the 2019 findings and recommendations of the Permitted Interaction Group on Climate Equity from the State Climate Commission, which amongst other items found that a discussion of a definition and examples of equity specific to Hawaii would be useful for furthering the Commission's goal of a clean, resilient, and equitable climate response within the state of Hawaii. And so on my end, what this looked like was an internal 12-page paper reviewing equity provisions specifically within state climate adaptation materials. So this meant looking at things like states, statutes, guidance documents, and tools that existed. And so within this paper, the first half works on establishing a general definition and a baseline of knowledge on what equity looks like and the components of equity, and how that looks in general when it's operationalized into state government. And then the second half of the paper was identifying where these local examples already exist, where equity has been explicitly addressed, as well as gaps where it hasn't been formally acknowledged or institutionalized, in order to demonstrate some areas for potential future efforts and to get that baseline background research established. And so what I'll be working on between now and the end of my term in December is converting this paper, this internal paper, into a public story map, both to make it more accessible and as well for ease of updating and maintaining as a living resource as new statutes and items come out. Next, I'd like to share with you all the work I've been doing with our state greenhouse gas sequestration task force. We've had 3 meetings so far in 2021. Our first one was earlier this year in February, which began after a year-long hiatus. And my role is in providing staff support for the task force. This looks much like with providing minutes and posting the agenda, coordinating for the presenters to prepare them for our upcoming meetings, as well as occasionally, as you can see here in the screenshot, for example, an article that I co-wrote for the American Planning Association's Hawaii chapter's newsletter to explain about the work that we've been doing and getting that outreach into the public sphere. One of the first things that I also did for the task force was to create a user guide as part of the task force's commitment to accessibility, to explain how to participate in Zoom from any one of the 3 interfaces. And on that note, we do have an upcoming meeting in a couple of weeks on November 17th. I'd just like to share with you all, and you're all, of course, welcome to attend. And then finally, I'd like to bring up the 2050 Sustainability Plan. Again, Danielle gave a wonderful presentation on that earlier, and so I'd just like to speak on my specific role within this work. So I was the project lead for the Sustaining Hawaii case study series. I wrote 16 of the 17 case studies that you saw in the plan over the course of 3.5 months, and I was responsible for organizing the interviews with the different partners, researching facts for them, and then actually, of course, writing up the roughly 300-word case studies that got published. And the goal for that was to connect and ground the sustainability plan document into the work that's already being done on within the state, throughout the state, connecting to the SDGs and to our goals and recommended actions. And then similarly to the equity work that I was doing with the foundations, I'm also working to convert the 2050 Sustainability Plan into a story map to make it a more interactive and engaging form. So what you see here is a work in progress version of that story map that I'm hopefully will have ready for rollout before end of my term. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to the next Vista.
Thanks, Brittany. Hi, everyone. My name is James McCowan, and I'm the Energy Affordability Specialist, and I'm housed in the State Energy Office. I just want to say thank you again to the members of the Commission for allowing us to speak today. We're really excited to share our projects. Next slide. So seeing as my role focuses on energy affordability, one of the first VISTA projects I worked on with HSEO was to develop a comprehensive guide of all the federal, state, and county level financial assistance resources that exist to help low-income residents to afford their energy needs. This resources was guided by AmeriCorps Vista's anti-poverty mission, as well as our Climate Ready Hawaii cohort's equity focus. It's available on the HSEO's website and includes information about programs ranging from those that can directly help to cover portions of a household's energy bill, to rebates to energy efficiency retrofits. It also contains some information about tax credits that can save households money and make it more affordable to participate in renewable energy. And so, as I mentioned, it's available on the website, and we can post the link in the chat. Additionally, Revere has been supporting the social media outreach campaign to highlight specific programs and resources to make this information make sure it's amplified to as many households as possible. Next slide, please. So the next project I'll highlight is the Social and Climate Vulnerability Framework. So as we heard earlier from McKenna Kaufman, the State Climate Commission has tasked this project to answer the question of who are the most vulnerable people in Hawaii to climate change. I won't go into too much detail again, since we already heard about it, but I was brought into this project right at the beginning to support background research to better understand the existing social and climate vulnerability index tools. And so to do this, I analyzed several different vulnerability index tools, including the CDC's Social Vulnerability Index tool, FEMA's Natural Hazard tool, and even some Hawaii-specific ones like the Oahu Social Vulnerability Index and the Climate Ready Oahu Mapping tool. And with the support of ANU and the UH team, we released a briefing report detailing the methodology of each tool, highlighting best practices and shortcomings, and contextualizing their usefulness to Hawaii and our Social Vulnerability Framework project. In addition to this background research, Revere and I also support ANU and the UH team with logistical support throughout the project. And before I pass it off to Revere, the other Vista in HSEO, I just wanted to thank McKenna, Suwan, and Maya at the UH team for bringing us in on the project and promoting opportunities for Vistas to learn and to support their work. So thank you. And with that, I can pass it on to the next Vista.
Aloha kaku. My name is Revere Wood. I'm the Community Engagement and Communications Specialist serving with the State Climate Commission, and I'm located at the Hawaii State Energy Office. Thank you all for listening to us speak. As a part of my role with the State Climate Commission and the Hawaii State Energy Office to achieve the 2045 clean energy goals and the state climate change mitigation goals, I primarily develop clean energy education. I release newsletters and news releases. I assist in event coordination and overhauling the website and strategic communications for the HSEO. I research and develop and release educational content on Hawaii's energy ecosystem. There you can find the handles for our Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. As well, I do provide assistance to Diana Lopera, who is the Vista with the DLNR, in developing content for the State Climate Commission's social media platforms as well, which I am putting the link in the chat, but for those on the YouTube, it's hi_climate for Instagram or facebook.com/hiclimate. As well, I research and create articles on the HSEO's projects and progress towards the 2045 clean energy goals to increase engagement capacity and create news releases on the important projects and information regarding Hawaii's ecosystem. Recently, we released a news release on the HSEO's diesel replacement rebate program, in which we present opportunities to Hawaii's to organizations in Hawaii so that they can replace their medium and heavy duty gas-powered vehicles with electric equivalents. As well, I assist the HSEO and DLNR staff in coordinating events, such as the electrification of transportation bill signing ceremony that happened back in June, the Social Climate Vulnerability Framework, which has been presented on, and the upcoming Illumination Summit. And I'm collaborating with the HSEO's contractors, Essence and Detail, to redesign the website to be more accessible to communities by updating technical content, reworking flow of information, creating graphics to support understanding of technical content, as well as rebranding the HSEO and reworking how we engage with communities. Next slide, please. In collaboration with James and Parker, who are the other Vistas with the HSEO, we are developing tools and guidelines to help the HSEO staff incorporate equity into projects and programs. We created a survey to establish the staff's baseline equity knowledge, and from that, we're compiling data to curate resources for the toolkits and guidelines. And eventually, we hope to be able to streamline the process of integrating equity into project and program planning, execution, and evaluation. We're excited that this project is going to continue with the year 2 vistas who will be in the HSCO, and hopefully this project can then be utilized by the other departments and the commission. Before I pass it off to Parker, I would also like to just give a thanks to the State Commission for sponsoring the VISTA program, and a big thanks to Anu and to the other managers in the interdepartmental cohort who have been mentoring us and working with us to develop these programs so that we can support vulnerable communities in Hawaii as they become climate resilient. Thank you. Parker, I'll pass it to you.
Thanks, Revere. Aloha kako. My name is Parker Kushima, and I serve as the Transportation Affordability Specialist with the Climate Ready Hawaii Vista cohort and the Hawaii State Energy Office. And again, mahalo to the Commission for the opportunity to share today. Next slide, please. So in my role, I've been working on projects and initiatives which support transportation affordability and equity across the state. I've been coordinating biweekly meetings of the Transportation Equity Hui, which is a group of state and county department representatives which discusses issues of equitable and affordable access to transportation and transportation needs across the state. One of these initiatives that I've been involved with is the planning and implementation of multimodal mobility and resilience hubs. I've assisted with collecting and sharing of information, plans, resources, and best practices about hubs across the state, and also supporting a platform for collaboration between state and county agencies. I've also had the opportunity to coordinate mobility hub presentations from industry experts, Alta Planning and Design, and Nelson Nygaard, in collaboration with the Hawaii Interagency Council for Transit-Oriented Development, and gave my own presentation on hubs in Hawaii to the engineers and architects of Hawaii. In addition to this work, I've also been collecting and sharing information about various clean and active transportation resources, including bicycle, pedestrian sharing services, transit, and electric vehicle initiatives. Next slide, please. So James Revere and I have been helping HSCO to develop a conceptual program called the Clean Energy Wayfinders, which is an employment opportunity to advance clean energy public outreach, education, and workforce development in Hawaii. Increasing vocalized community concerns about energy projects' benefits and impacts on host communities have made it clear that a deliberate and more intentional effort must be made to reach out to and include everyone in Hawaii to more effectively, efficiently, and equitably achieve our 100% clean energy and carbon-free economy goals. To support this effort, the program will train its members, or wayfinders, in clean energy, clean transportation, and community engagement topics to work with community organizations and leaders to identify community needs and share relevant clean energy educational opportunities, financial or technical resources, and green workforce development opportunities. Wayfinders would ideally live in or have a deep understanding of the communities they would serve, allowing them to tap into their own community networks and understanding of place. Discussions with the Energy Equity Hui, which is an interagency working group focused on collaboration around the topics of energy equity in the state, helped us decide on the name Wayfinders, referencing the culture and history of Native Hawaiian ocean navigation, because the Wayfinders will help communities to navigate Hawaii's energy ecosystem and will be trained as the next generation of clean energy leaders. And I'll quickly pass it to James to share about our contribution to the project.
Thanks, Parker. So throughout our year of VISTA service, we have helped the HSCO to take this concept from its earliest outline stages to its current, more fully developed program concept. We've worked to help to define the parameters of who an ideal Wayfinder candidate would be, the focus of their work, the performance measures to ensure that communities are supported as the state transitions to 100% renewable energy. We've also begun building relationships with community leaders and program partners, and are currently working to secure grants and financial strategies that ensure the program is successfully launched and has the resources to sustainably grow after its initial year. We have been developing the program further by brainstorming clean energy, transportation, and equity training modules in collaboration with local university students. And these training modules will guide the eventual Wayfinder training orientation curriculum, which will be developed alongside energy industry experts and community organizations. Finally, we have been developing a community database through ArcGIS to assist in the HSCO's community engagement efforts and help to identify community organizations and residents for Wayfinder program participation. And I'll just say that helping to develop this program has been one of the highlights of our VISTA service. And so we do thank our supervisors and program partners for their support and are really excited for next year's VISTA cohort to grow it further and help ensure that they have a successful launch. So thanks. Back to Parker.
Thanks, James. And next slide, please. The final project I'd like to introduce to you all is the Grants to Projects Bridge, which is a resource that supports the Commission's July 19th statement to help direct decision-making and investments to priority climate-smart infrastructure, which we accomplish by connecting underutilized grants to underfunded projects across the state. The bridge was developed by a group of our VISTA cohort under the supervision and guidance of our great supervisor, Anukedo, and currently includes resilient natural and working lands projects compiled by former AmeriCorps and Kupu member Megan Gonzalez, active and multimodal transportation projects, which was my focus, and the relevant grants to these project types compiled by fellow VISTA Sabrina Park, all gathered through online research and collaboration with state and county departments. The Grants to Projects Bridge website, which was designed by fellow VISTA Diana Lopera, is housed on the Hawaii Climate Portal and includes detailed spreadsheets to present grants and project information in a clean and uniform, accessible format, along with a provenance document, which explains the methodology used to create the resource and additional information. The Grants to Projects Bridge is currently live in its first phase, and future iterations of this tool may include filling gaps in the current scope of grants and projects, expanding the scope to include additional focus areas, and redesigning the interface to be more accessible. So we hope this resource will really serve the public and government agencies well. And if there are any comments or suggestions for additions to the tool, then please feel free to share this and reach out to our team through Anu. So mahalo, everyone, and I'll pass it off to the next VISTA.
Aloha all, and thank you again for having us all here. It has been truly an honor to work with this commission and to grow and develop with you all. My name is Sabrina Park. I am the Transportation Equity Specialist, and I'm housed in the Department of Health. So as Parker was mentioning just before, this is our project, which was the Grants to Project Bridge. I was fortunate enough to participate and work on the grants section, which is intended to make all the local, community, and federal grants easily accessible to both public and internal government agencies. Another good thing that we offer with this Excel spreadsheet that you can also find on the Hawaii Climate Commission site is a list of our local community grants, as well as our federal grants and state funding sources, which are organized into two separate spreadsheets. The grants and funding sources are also described in depth with branch contact information and links to direct application processes. So there's also other information if you're interested in checking that out. Again, you can go right onto our home site and find that there. So yeah, that was. And then my other project that I'm working on with the DOH is the Statewide Transportation Equity Working Group. So the goals of our working group is to develop a statewide transportation equity working group, which is centered on people and communities who have a direct lived experience with transportation inequities. We are currently in the process of building a coalition to ensure that our transportation systems are prioritizing health and safety for users of every age, gender, race, ability, and neighborhood. My role with this statewide transportation equity working group has been to create and conduct surveys at our monthly, actually bi-monthly steering committee meetings, provide and contribute to survey feedback analysis. I also do a lot of note taking and shared notes. And also I do a lot of internal group networking, such as outreach and engagement to fellow organizations here in Hawaii that represent our different vulnerable populations and communities across the state. I also do a lot of research and implementing better practices and tips for successful coalitions, especially in our circumstances with COVID. We've done a lot of virtual meetings. So it's been pretty creative in getting different types of things to help engage everyone in our presentations. So that has definitely been very good with us. I also do compile the contact list and send meeting invites to different group members. A lot of it is capacity building. So conducting effective communication for outreach and engaging with other potential transportation equity work group members has definitely been exciting. So that is my current projects at the moment. And I just also wanted to thank everyone within the departments and our organizations who have contributed all of their time and information and resources to help us make this all possible with our Grants to Projects Bridge, as well as anyone who has helped with our statewide transportation equity working group. So thank you all for having us. It's truly been an honor. And with that, here is Diana.
Alrighty, aloha mai kako. So I introduced myself a little bit earlier, but my name is Diana Lopera. I am the Climate Change Communication Specialist. I am housed under the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and I work directly with our very favorite Hawaii Climate Commission Coordinator, Anu Hiro. And so when I'm not working behind the scenes to make the logistics for our quarterly meetings, a large part of my job is actually to help amplify the work done by the Commission. And one of the ways that I do this is through our website operations. As mentioned earlier by Parker and Sabrina, I had a role in the Grants to Projects Bridge. I helped created the web interface to make it accessible for the people to get into these resources that have been compiled by our peers. And so in general, I keep the website up to date with recent commission releases. So any meeting agendas, meeting documents that we have provided or made, I make sure that it's easily accessible through our climate change portal, and also ensuring that the accessibility of this website is available for everyone, regardless of where and who you are in accessing our resources. And so I've also created a number of tools and resources to help amplify the work that we have done with the Commission. So for example, as a companion for our sea level rise guidance report for planners, I created an interactive tool for planners and permitters to navigate through potential sea level rise impacts that may impact the areas that they are doing work in using the SLRX model. I've also aided in the production of our latest Climate Ready Hawaii working paper that is focused on nature-based solutions and resilience and adaptation in Hawaii. And also lastly, I've also helped in the compiling climate-related legislation. So any legislation that has been passed since 2018 that are related to climate action up to current 2021. I have collected this and housed it in our website so that people can see what legislation we have done in order to address the climate crisis. And so another part of amplifying the work of the Commission is through our social media presence. I manage our social media accounts in Instagram and Facebook. And in order for us to continue having this presence and continue to have this conversation through these platforms, I have helped created a social media overview, which is a guidebook for those that come after me who will continue to manage these platforms on how to deal with the messaging and how to ensure that our presence is sound and how to ensure that we continue to have a conversation and hold a wider reach to the work that we do. And so a part of that is also to create a lot of content. And so some of the collaborations that we have done is we collaborate with different organizations to create these compelling storytelling content. So for example, as you can see here, this short animation video, I created this in collaboration with Board of Water Supply during Earth Week of earlier this year, where we tied and made the connections between climate change, Oahu's watersheds, and ground transportation. And when we do these mini packages, these mini campaigns, we also create and distribute these into packages that we send out to our communications Hui, which is a group, an informal group of organizations who are related, who have similar messages about climate change and climate action. And so we share it with them and so that they can amplify the work that we do in their respective networks and to help broaden their reach and ensure that a lot of people, more people can see what we're doing and what we plan to do. And also we also produce monthly newsletters. So every month we send out a newsletter to our growing list of over 300 individuals, just to keep everybody who may not be able to come to these meetings or may not be on social media to see what we have done and what we plan to do as we continue to progress with climate action in Hawaii. And so another part of my job is to help communicating climate change in Hawaii. So a big part of my job is to help break down these complex climate change related issues in ways that are digestible and easy to follow formats. And so how I do that is when we frame our content, we do it in the context of Hawaii and how the people of Hawaii can understand what climate change means to them personally. So you can see here on the right is just a slideshow of some of the topics that I've covered of educational slide decks. This ranges from transportation and electric vehicles, all the way to sea level rise and heat waves. And so I also these are produced and can be shared and are all available to the public. And we encourage it to be used at community meetings with various hui's, and all the information that I've collected and created are also the foundation of the presentations that I use when I have conversations with civic organizations and different audiences when we have conversations about climate change in Hawaii. And lastly, another type of content that we create is climate blogs. So these are short, easily digestible articles that break down specific climate change topics in Hawaii. And so we have them housed in our website as well, called Hi Blogs. And I've written a couple of those. And to help broaden our reach, I've also written short pieces that have been published in department newsletters, such as the Department of Transportation's monthly newsletter. And so moving towards a climate ready Hawaii, I also help in providing logistical support to produce commission sponsored talks and events. So for example, in Earth Week earlier this year, I helped with the logistics of planning the virtual event that for Governor Ige when he was talking about our common future action for the climate decade. And most recently, I've been involved in helping with the logistics for our Ha'okekai collection, where we bring in climate leaders from all around the world to have these conversations about the climate crisis and what we can do from a global, a national, and a local level. And lastly, we collaborate with other organizations as well. These are just a few of who we've collaborated with to help promote the Commission and the state of Hawaii, for example, in international meetings. So most recently, the IUCN World Conservation Congress, I work closely with the UH School of Law to help amplify their presence in the Hawaii delegation in IUCN. And then most recently with the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, I have helped with preparing to send off our Hawaii delegation to continue to have a voice in these spaces. I'm actually going to be joining them on the ground in Glasgow. I will be going as the YMCA ambassador for their youth delegation. So I'll be there as a YMCA ambassador, as well as providing extra support for our commission as we continue to progress towards a climate-ready Hawaii. And so just on behalf of our cohort, we just want to give a big mahalo to all our partners and supporters. As you can see, we have done a lot in our year of service, and this was not done alone. This was all made possible because of the guidance and the support and the resources provided by so many departments and organizations, both here, members in the commission, as well as organizations all across the island, across the state, and across the nation. And so we just want to say a big mahalo, and we are super grateful to have been part of this experience, and we're excited to see what goes forward. Yeah. So Anu.
Thank you. Thank you. And everybody, please join me in just joining your hands and giving a big thank you and a great send off to our year one Vistas. And as they look for next steps, please reach out if you think they might be interested in some opportunities that you may or may not have in your, that you hopefully have in your offices. And for those listening in, please keep tabs on us via Instagram and Facebook as we are heading off to COP26. We'll be actively posting on our social media. Our hashtags are hashtag Aloha COP26 and hashtag Hawaii Delegation COP26. With our vistas, you can see that they've worked across all these departments and offices. Even during a pandemic, we've managed to do that. And so it wasn't only that they were expanding capacity, but we're actually working and breaking down some of those silos. A lot of the projects were group projects that we did in 2s and 3s. So it was a really, really interesting first year experience. We're hoping to build on this. And next year, of course, as I mentioned, we'll have 10 vistas in 3 counties and 7 in the state offices. Not exactly the same configuration as this year, but we're sort of expanding out this year to some of the other departments that that we'd like to include in the climate ready work, equity work. So anyway, so thank you. That's our cohort. And over to you, Chair. We're sort of finished here, I think. We don't have any dates for next year, but I'm sure I'll be working with you both co-chairs to figure that out. So just thanks to everybody for listening in and for actively engaging.
And thanks to all of the Vista folks for just a huge amount of work. And I mean, just to hear it all, I mean, you can see how sort of cross-jurisdictional it is, what a great networking opportunity it is, and for the agencies involved to have you connecting us all and focusing on all of these really important projects. Just I think if anybody is wondering why things are really gelling in Hawaii on climate action, you can just look at the work you're doing and know that we're charging ahead and doing it with a fair and equitable focus and with great communication. And it's just very, very encouraging. So huge mahalo from all of us for all of your work. I just want to ask the commissioners if they have any questions or comments for our Vista workers, or if any members of the public want to.
This is David
make a
Tarnas,
statement.
State Rep, and I just wanted to say I'm so impressed. I'm grateful for your service. You've done a lot to help us out, and I just want to say thank you. That's all. Thanks. Back to you, Chair Case.
Thank you for that. I know you speak for everyone on the commission. All right. Any further comments? I hope I didn't just freeze because my computer is freezing.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our meeting. Super interesting meeting, and we'll just stay tuned. There will be lots more to come. And with that, we will adjourn, but we will be watching closely. And thank you all for all of your great work. Aloha.
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 Everyone.
Aloha.
Thank you, everyone.